Welcome back to another video. Here I have a video titled The Real Reason Men Are Quietly Giving Up. Very curious as to what this is about. Let's get into it.
I was looking at some stats earlier on that said there's been increased sexual inactivity amongst young men, which is an interesting stat. It's risen to almost 31% of men between the ages of 18 and 24 reporting no sexual activity in the past year. So that's almost doubled in about the space of 18 years.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting stat. High suicide rates amongst men. Men account for nearly 80% of all suicides in the US. The highest rate observed among 45 to 64-year-olds globally. Suicide
80% is wild. 80%. And the ages were what? 44? Let me see that
the
again.
lead rate observed among 45 to 64-year-olds globally. Suicide
44 to 65. That's crazy.
is the leading cause of death amongst young men. And a survey conducted in the UK found that an increasing amount of men feel hopeless and worthless and that are struggling with finding meaning and purpose in the world. The plight of young men. You talk in your books and in your work about how the role of a man has changed and how that this might not be necessarily productive for the health and well-being of a man.
Yeah. We've taken away their purpose. When you take a human being's purpose away, remember the purpose for men was protect their family, it was to hunt in the old days, feed their families, but it was also to protect their families. It was to provide for their families. And what we've done in reversing everything is, although we raised up women, and there are certainly positive things about raising up women, but when we raised up women, we denigrated men. And I have two sons, so this is very personal for me. And I also see a lot of young men in my practice, young adult men. And what I'll say is that they feel discouraged, they feel purposeless, they feel diminished. And there has been something vengeful, I think, about... So the feminist movement was meant to give women choice and to balance off what was imbalanced in society. But there's something vengeful about it. I think at moments I feel like there's something vengeful about the modern feminist movement, which is, let's get them, let's diminish them, let's take over, let's push them out, let's beat them up, let's show them who's, something really vengeful.
And again, they didn't come up with this out of nowhere. If you ever consumed any female media as far as it was written or directed by women for women, it always has some man doing something evil to them. It's never like a woman. Like they're trying to show another woman who's boss. No, it's always some evil man that has done something and that has fueled her to do whatever it is that she sets up upon. And I think it's always that way, by the way. At least all of the media that I've ever consumed, it's always the same reoccurring pattern where there's always some evil man. It's never like an evil woman. It's an evil man. And so I think they get that from that.
So for me, the feminist movement was meant to create balance. It wasn't meant to set into play this other kind of imbalance. And more than, I think 60% of universities are women now, as well as graduate schools. And so that means, and the studies show that men will marry at their educational level or below. Women will only marry at their educational level or above. And by diminishing men so much in terms of our education and professions, we've basically taken men's purpose away. They feel purposeless. And the other thing is, and I'm going to say, when men stay home to nurture their children, now, remember, as mammals, we have defined roles. That is not instinctual for men to stay home and nurture their young. It's a reverse of something. And the issue there is that there's an inverse relationship between oxytocin and testosterone. The higher the oxytocin, guess what?
The lower the testosterone.
Yes.
So if we're staying at home bonding, then
there's a reason for that. So mammals, when they are nurturing their young, they don't want somebody mating with them. Go away, right? So the idea is that when a female nurtures, she doesn't want to have sex. She doesn't want to, right? So the investment in nurturing pushes away the investment in mating.
And this is why I've read so many stats around men's testosterone dropping when they become fathers. I couldn't believe that was true when I read it.
It's true. There were some studies to talk about how women's testosterone goes up. Women have testosterone. when they're out in the work world fighting like men, that their testosterone goes up and men's testosterone when they stay home goes down. Now, what that's doing for sex lives, there's some research about, that is the next wave, which is what does it do to sex lives? Because men have to perform. They have to get it up, to be crude.
Tell me about it.
And so if your testosterone is low, you're
That man said, "Tell me about it."
not going to get it up, right? Which is why there's all this Viagra and these patches and supplements, and because it's not instinctually normal for husbands to stay home and nurture their children, and that's the inconvenient truth. How that affects men's and women's sex life when women come home from their banking jobs and their law jobs, do their husbands not want to have sex with them? And, is that breaking up? So this is all I think this is the next wave of, we've reversed things societally.
And I think it's really interesting because you have to think, right? We're talking about all of the men here. And so we're not talking about the men who are eating healthy, who are eating fruits and vegetables, who are making sure they're getting their cardio in, who are making sure that they're the leader of the relationship, who's actively working on themselves, who's making sure they're self-improving, who's making sure they're getting sunlight. We're not talking about those type of men. We're talking about a few. It's not even a few. We're talking about a subsection of men who are not doing any of that, or who are only doing maybe one or two of those things. And so this just really drives the point home of how important it is that you have to have personal vision for yourself. You have to have a direction for yourself. You have to understand your own development, your own improvement. That way you understand what is it going to take to perform optimally. Most men that I think they're talking about are the men who sometimes I find in my comment section who are completely given up, but still try, quote unquote, and then get in these relationships or have these children and they become fathers. That's what they're talking about. I honestly don't think that if we took all of the men and we watch the guys who are eating healthy, who are making sure they're going after it every single day, who are trying to eat healthy and exercise and all these other things, I highly doubt that they're having as many problems as the guys who are doing the complete opposite of that.
So fast. And then we hope that our evolutionary bodily responses are just going to catch up in nearly a century. And it just doesn't, evolution doesn't work like that. It takes hundreds, if not thousands of years to change our bodily evolutionary responses, right? Our instinctual responses. So this is, it's problematic. And also when men's testosterone goes down, they get depressed. So they don't perform sexually well, they get depressed, they feel purposeless. They can't do what they're instinctually supposed to do, which is provide, protect, hunt,
And I think it's get even worse because when we add fapping to it, when we add corn to it, so many guys are spilling their seed on top of that. And trust me when I say, at least this is anecdotal in my experience, I feel completely different when I'm with somebody versus if I'm by myself. It's a completely different feeling, especially over a longer period of time, whatever a long period of time means to you. And I think it's like you have the more guys who are not in these relationships, not practicing or sexually active, and they're out here spilling their seed to corn. Not only is their body being affected, but their mind is being affected as well.
We talk about DEI. I mean, why aren't we talking about DEI when it comes to men and women? Why aren't we talking about balancing the scales, giving men purpose again? And honestly, we should be talking about what happens to men when they actually do stay home and nurture their young.
Is there stats to support the idea that if you're at home raising your kids as a man, you struggle in the bedroom?
So there was some research I know that was going on about that, how it affects sex drive. But when your testosterone goes down, it does affect sex drive. Mm-hmm. We're just not talking about it. So I have anecdotal patients. I have a patient whose wife was a hardcore woman in finance, and he lost interest in her. He had to go out of the marriage and have affairs with women who were more feminine, who were more, so he could feel as if he could play that masculine role. He couldn't do that in his marriage. And so are we going to see kind of a shift in society as a result of this? We're already seeing it. I mean, the other thing that we're doing is to young boys. Let's talk about what we're doing to young boys. This starts very.
So before she gets into that, I want to mention that to solve this problem or to potentially solve this problem, we're going to have to create a system that is the opposite of what we have right now. And let me explain that really quick. It's like one of the things that when I look at the feminists, or at least the real feminists, not the ones that are chronically online and only sleep with the dudes that they complain about, right? I'm talking about these girls. Some girls, I watched this girl. She's a business owner and she made a women's only gym. Now I know a lot of the manosphere likes to make fun of those gyms, but the way that she marketed and everything, she did a good job. And when you walk inside, she did a tour of it. It's girly everything. She has plenty of members. Everything looks like it's working out. I think that is a great idea. And I think it's one of those things that we have to not only think about for the women, so the women thought about it, but it also has to be done for the men. I think the public education system, there has to be a split to where there is the sit down in class and look at the screen type of teaching, because some people thrive in that environment. And then there should be another one where it's completely hands-on, where it's all about kinetic learning. You're building things, you're sawing things. So many, bro, if I had that when I was a boy, I would be in there all the time. I'd be learning woodworking, mechanics, all that other stuff. And so I know this is available as you get older, but I'm thinking that maybe you should have like a child's version of this when they're young, because so many boys are active and what people will say like hyperactive, that they're giving them a disorder, when in reality, bro, they're children. They have a lot of energy. Some kids can sit down and learn. Other kids need to be moving about, running around. I was one of those kids. I needed to be moving around. I learned better when I was able to fix things and see things how they worked and have instructions in that way. And so I think when we start to solve this problem, eventually they're just going to have to realize that some people learn this way and some people learn this way, and they have to have more options for the people who are more kinesthetic learners.
Young. We basically educate young boys in a way that really favors girls. From a very young age, we talk about being able to sit quietly and regulate your emotions and not be aggressive and not be impulsive. And these little boys are being diagnosed with ADHD, many of them just for being little boys. Little boys need to run around.
Come on. I know what I'm talking about.
They have a lot of physical energy. They have tons of testosterone. When you're like between 3 and 6, you have a surge of testosterone. And all you want to do is run and jump and play and be outside. And what we're doing, we're putting them in school, making them sit in circle time. So we marginalize them, we label them, we say they have a problem, we say that they have ADHD, they have behavioral problems. And in many of them,
and even worse, when they're told to these parents, a lot of them being single mothers or masculine fathers who don't care or who aren't masculine fathers, they're putting them on pills. So they're mentally castrating them at that for being normal boys and wondering why they grow up messed up.
the stress that I talked about is the stress of making little boys be more like little girls. And that's where it starts. And so then they go into childhood. And again, the educational system favors the way girls learn, not the way boys learn. How do boys learn? Boys have attention spans for very short periods of time, and then they need lots of physical activity. So ideally, if you go to and look at the boys' schools, what do? They run the boys like running the dogs in the park. They sit for 45 minutes or half an hour, but then the boys get time off to run around. And then they'll sit another half an hour, and then they'll run around. I mean, they have like 4 recess periods a day. And so that's really better for boys. And little girls have more.
I'm the same way too. When I got my walking treadmill, that was such a game changer for me, because it's like I need to be doing something. I need to be moving, and just moving like that. Not only am I getting my cardio in, right, which is good for your health, but it also allows me to stay more focused.
More of a capacity to sit quietly in circle time and sort of, they don't have as much testosterone. They don't have that need to run and jump and play to the same degree that little boys do. They do need to play. We're not letting our kids play, boys and girls, because we're trying to force left brain development on them too early. But we are forcing little boys into this box, and they're not doing well in that box. And then they're labeled. They're labeled as having behavioral problems, ADHD, and that label then follows them through childhood, sometimes into middle school, into high school. Yeah.
What would you change? I make you prime minister of the world, president of the world, and you can fix this issue.
Oh, I would have little boys educated separately than little girls in the early years. In the early years, I would have boys' schools and girls' schools, because little girls learn differently. And also, there's been a lot of evidence to show that in the early years, when you do single gender education, little girls will try things, will take risks with things that they wouldn't in front of little boys. And little boys will try things that they wouldn't take risks in front of little girls. Like little boys are more likely to try art and painting and music. Little girls are more likely to try STEM and math and, all these things that we talk about little girls should do. So the idea is that single gender education in the early years is better for little kids because they learn differently.
What about as it relates to men? What would you change to fix the issues you were talking about with testosterone and those kinds of issues?
Talk about it. We should be talking about it. We don't talk about this issue. How many times have you heard what I just said? People don't talk about the fact that if we're going to flip this around and have men be the nurturers, they're going to have pretty low testosterone. You're going to have to supplement their testosterone. And so, and also you take their purpose away evolutionarily and they get depressed. Women have many sources of self-esteem. They have work, they have children, they're relational. And for the most part, historically, men found their self-esteem from meaningful and purposeful work and also from protecting their families. So what we've done is we've taken their purposeful work outside the home away. We've made their purposeful work staying home with children. And, we've lowered the testosterone. So if you look at it and say, we're trying to switch, it's like a social experiment. We're trying to change something that's taken thousands of years of evolution to create in just, less than 100 years. And it's problematic. So what would I do? I would talk about it. I would have couples talk about it. I think they need to talk about the competitiveness. I think they need to talk about the envy and the jealousy and even the disappointment. I mean, a woman who comes home and sees her husband caring for the children, on one hand, she might say, oh, my husband's so sweet and lovely, and I love that he cares for my children. And on the other hand, she says to her friends, I wish he was bringing in more money, and I wish he was taking care, I wish he was taking care of me. So it's problematic.
There was a longitudinal study done in the Philippines that followed 624 men over almost 5 years and found that those who became fathers experienced a significant decline in testosterone levels. Specifically, newly partnered fathers had a median decrease of almost 30% in morning testosterone and 35% in evening testosterone, which was significantly greater than the declines observed in single non-fathers. Moreover, fathers who reported spending 3 or more hours daily in childcare had lower testosterone levels compared to those less involved in caregiving. And there's also an impact on co-sleeping, where research indicates that fathers who co-sleep with their children exhibit lower testosterone levels than those who do not. This suggests that close proximity during sleep may further influence hormonal changes associated with parental caregiving. One of the arguments I've heard before as to why men's testosterone dips if they're new fathers is because it's an evolutionary reason to make us not go out and cheat on our partner and take care of our kids.
Well, it's investment in it. So either you're invested in mating or you're invested in caring for your
So it's
children.
a good thing.
Yes and no, because you still need to have testosterone to have a relationship with your wife, a satisfying relationship. So, and unfortunately, that doesn't stop men from going out and cheating on their wives, because a healthy man would say, well, we used to have sex twice a day, every day. And now that we have a baby, we only have sex once or twice a week because the baby's so small. And a healthy man would say, that's enough. I can compartmentalize. Right? A less healthy man might say, I'm going to go out and get it someplace else because I can't get it here. So yeah, I mean, there's nuance to all the questions you're asking. But what I would say is that testosterone going down a little bit when you have a baby in the bed is fine. But the kind of testosterone we're talking about going down when you stay home and nurture, we'll see. It could be problematic.
My last question is about devices and technology.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of books written recently and a lot of conversation around the impact that screens, social media, mobile phones have on children. What is your thoughts and philosophy towards raising healthy kids in a world of technology?
Well, I think it's the American Pediatric Association says no technology under the age of 2 for good reason. No iPhones, no iPads.
It shouldn't even be 2. I think about this too. I'm like, if I had kids, I don't think I would give them a phone until at least, I couldn't, bro, even like middle school, maybe. I won't even want to give them at middle school. It's like, if you've ever seen these kids on these devices, they have real addictions. Like, you take it away and they are crying, bawling their eyes out, bro. This is not like a regular toy that they forget about and then move on. No, this is something that like they need, like damn near a hardcore drug.
Right. You want to sit and watch a Mr. Rogers when your baby is 2 together, a rerun of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, that's fine, but no technology. After that, you want to really regulate that technology. Now, why is that important? Because technology raises dopamine levels in your brain, which is why adults get addicted to it too. It's very addictive. And the problem is that with adults, when you look at technology, it does raise your dopamine, but there was some research to show that technology raises the dopamine in an adolescent's brain tenfold to that of. So in other words, it would be like if you smoked a joint, it would make you high. If an adolescent smoked the same joint, it would make them 10 times higher. It has to do with the sensitivity of the brain to dopamine and the lack of regulation. So the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that regulates emotions, and it's not fully developed till about 25. So all that dopamine that has to be regulated is more easily regulated in an adult than an adolescent. So it's not good because it leads to addiction. Okay. It's not good because particularly social media, but all kinds of technology, they get the amygdala going. Remember that little almond-shaped stress-regulating part of the brain? It turns on the stress reaction, which you don't want to do chronically. There's lots of problems with that. And in the case of social media, with adolescents, particularly adolescent girls, it takes advantage. I mean, you have to say that this was invented to take advantage. It's not a coincidence. It's manipulatively created because the reason that it's so bad for teenage girls' brains is because the self-consciousness, the perfectionism, is all the brain in a hyper-alert state of stress and fear. You're putting those girls and boys into a hyper-vigilant state of fear and stress, right? I have to be perfect. I don't look as good as them. My dress isn't as pretty. So you're putting children.
And for the boys, you got to think about it. Notice how she said it's like 10 times more. Now, what if you threw in corn into the mix? What if you threw in dirty movies into the mix? Now it gets really dangerous because we all know that's even more addicting. And so now you have these boys starting at a low age who have an endless amount. On one side, they're being told they're not good enough because they need to be 6 feet with a six pack with making six figures at the age of 14, 15, 16. And then on the other hand, which again is reinforced by their peers. And then on the other hand, they have this quote unquote way out to where at any point in time, they could get any type of fantasy met. Because what's stopping it? Age verification? Come on now, get out of here. That's not going to work, right? Trust me, and a lot of these kids know Google, they know ChatGPT, they're going to find ways to get around it. There are easy ways to get around it. You remember when you were a kid, okay? You knew how to get around things on the internet. You knew exactly if you were downloading an illegal movie that the first 4 pop-ups, you had to immediately X out because on that 5th time, it would play the movie, right? That's ball knowledge. Only like if you ever watch somebody else go through that, they're like letting all these things load and you're like, what are you doing? Right. You don't have they don't have that expertise, but we do, you understand? And so I think it's going to be even worse because the addiction is starting lower, and because it's such instant gratification, there's no real reason why they should be putting themselves out there to go through the fire of getting the potential of making something happen. It's a huge recipe for disaster, man.
Children into a fear state, and then they can't separate from the device. It's like there was a movie, I think it was called Inception, where you could get stuck in a paradigm. You could get stuck in this fantasy, right? In a virtual reality. In a way, they get trapped in this paradigm of perfectionism, social isolation, self-consciousness, which is all the brain in a hyper-vigilant state of stress.
Anxiety.
So not good at all. Not good for adults, much worse for adolescent brains.
What is the most important thing we should have talked about today that we didn't talk about so far?
I think we talked about a lot, but I think, what I would say is that presence is just so critical to children, and there's no replacement. This idea that we have as a society that caregiving of children is something that can be generically assigned to others, that you can delegate other things to others, delegate your accounting, delegate your laundry, delegate your cooking. If you're a CEO, delegate everything you can, but spend time with your children. Your relationship with them, their mental health.
And that's something I thought was funny when I was young, where people were having like family game night and people talking around the dinner table, because usually if you looked at those families, they were a little weird, but at the same time, they did damn near everything together. Like I've talked to these kids and these kids would be like, oh, well, I wasn't allowed to watch these types of TV shows, or I could only play video games for like an hour, or I can only, right? These had structure, they had discipline, right? And again, because of that growing up, yes, they weren't as socially, how should I put this? Socially in tuned with the rest of us. But at the same time, I bet you if we compared their lives with everybody else's lives, I guarantee you they're going to be much more happier and much more in control, much more regulated, simply because their childhood allowed for it without crossing the boundary of being like super hardcore. So I'm done. I think they're done talking about men are quietly giving up, but it really puts things in perspective. But one of the things that I really want us to realize is they're talking about a subsection of men, okay? They're not talking about the men who are actively trying, who are taking action every day, who are getting in communities and groups with other men who are trying to make things happen. I don't think they're talking about that. They're not talking about the men who are eating healthy, who are taking control of their health, taking control of their money, taking control of their relationships, taking control of their entire life, and really having a vision for their life. I don't think they're talking about those men. I think they're talking about the men who are falling for all of these traps, and again, sometimes not even at their own will, sometimes against their own will. They fall into these traps early and they're battling this addiction, and the light at the end of the tunnel doesn't seem appealing, because in order to get there you have to put in a lot of work that doesn't get rewarded instantaneously but gets rewarded in the long term. And that's really hard to shake out of somebody who's used to getting instant gratification whenever they want. Social media, corn, all video games, all these different things that will keep you sedentary for your life and not grow. So anyway, that's going to be the end of this video. Like the video if you like the video. Check the description for the resources, see if those things will help you out, and leave me a comment. If you made it this far, tell me your thoughts, and then let me know, are you giving up or are you going to keep going? Let me know. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.